Hey guys, so what you're seeing here is my humble book collection. Now, I do own some comic books, however, these are just the novels that I own. I don't have much, to be honest, but I just thought I'd quickly show you what I do have, as they're pretty interesting, and just wanted to give you a quick walkthrough of what I have. So it's nothing major, this should be a short video because of that. However, let's just take a look. Now, it has to be said, both in terms of the novels that I own and the comic books, I tend to be a little bit too generous and I let people borrow them. I let people borrow the books and I never see them again. So that kind of explains why my collection is so small. However, forgetting that, let's make a start here. So if you followed my gaming channel, the chances are you're somewhat familiar with the Witcher series. So you've got two individual Witcher books here, which are made up of short stories. Now, they are tied into the Witcher saga, however these are individual stories, and so you can read these books without having too much prior knowledge of the series. In terms of the Witcher saga, I believe you have about 5 or 6 books. So you've got these two standalone books which are short stories, and then you have the Witcher saga, which is made up of about at least 5 books. And Blood of Elves is the first book in the Witcher saga. As you can see there, that's Dandelion. If I just quickly show you, you can see The Last Wish. This is probably my favourite one. You can see Geralt rather. And Andrei Sapkowski, I believe. So The Last Wish, this is probably my favourite one because it does have some very interesting stories. Now, because these are short stories, it focuses more on things like monster hunting, and you get an insight into the procedure that a Witcher takes when tackling a sort of contract. So there's a really nice story where King Foltest's daughter has been cursed, and she is now is it a Striga, I believe, and so she's forced to live in these sort of catacombs, and numerous witchers has been hired beforehand, and so Geralt comes along and he has to investigate. This is what I like about this. You really see the process of which Geralt takes to actually investigate the contracts. Similar to The Witcher 3, he talks to people, gathers clues, and then he's just got this very interesting battle where he finally has to take on Foltest's daughter, but the catch is he's not allowed to kill her, so he has to find a way to lift the curse. And I won't spoil it, but it is very interesting. There's also a story where he meets a cursed creature living in a mansion on its own, and rather than just outright attack it, Geralt talks to the creature, finds out its backstory, where the curse comes from, etc. And you know, there's all these little interesting twists. There's a couple stories, like I said, that are tied into the main saga, but this to me just felt like the most rewarding book. Although it's made up of individual stories, there's a kind of underlying story that plays out in between, where Geralt's been injured and he's recuperating, and he kind of reflects on everything that's happened, and then you've just got a nice kind of build up. You know, you've got a nice build up, and then the conclusion at the end, after all these individual stories are kind of linked together. It's a very satisfying read, and this was actually the first book that I read. Also, The Last Wish introduces Yennefer for the first time. If you played The Witcher 3, you'll know that there's a little side quest that involves a djinn, where it turns out Geralt and Yennefer were bound together by a wish that was made with a djinn. Well, this actually has that story, where Yennefer tries to control a djinn, and it grants several wishes. That's in this book. Then you've got The Sword of Destiny. At first I didn't know who this was. I'm tempted to say it's a young Geralt, to be honest. The Sword of Destiny is a lot slower, but it's got some interesting stories. Blood of Elves, to be honest, wasn't really a huge fan of the Blood of Elves, but I just found that to be just a very, very slow read. It had some good moments, but I mean, as the first book, it really felt like it was setting up the world and introducing all the characters, so the pacing was just a lot slower. Next up, we have Metro 2033. Now, I actually done a book review for this. That was my first video on this channel. Feel free to check that out. I did rate this book quite highly. It was very interesting. Obviously, you've got the book, the game. The game's based on the book. Slow pace, but very interesting. A lot of good detail, a lot of atmosphere. It's got some supernatural elements, but at the same time it's got that gritty sort of realism to it, as it's set in a post-apocalyptic world where nuclear war has essentially ravaged the land, forcing everyone to live in the metro. If it sounds like I'm out of breath, it's because it is absolutely roasting. Far too warm for Scotland, I'll tell you. Now, this is my recent book, and this is an absolute monster. So you've got Stephen King's It. This book is about 1,300 pages. This book is an absolute monster. I've not started it yet. However, I recently watched the original film, which I thought was pretty shit. However, I've heard the book is just much more grittier, goes into a lot more detail, and it's just a much more satisfying read. So I will be reading this at some point. I might even do a little review. Next up we have this is the book version of the Suicide Squad film. I am in no rush to read this as I wasn't a huge fan of the film. However, I've got it, so there you go. This is probably my prized possession. Let's take a good look at this. Absolute mammoth. So this is your A Song of Ice and Fire series. These are what the Game of Thrones TV show is based on. So as you can see, you've got 7 individual books, 5 volumes, as 2 of the books are split into 2 of the volumes rather are split into 2 parts. As you can see, Storm of Swords and The Dance with Dragons are 2 parts. This is a hell of a read. I mean, it gives you an idea of just how big the book world is and how much bigger the world is in the books compared to the show. The show has, what, 6 seasons out so far? Well, you've got 7 individual books. These are lengthy books. It will take a long time to read, but there's just so much more detail, so much extra characters and story arcs in the book. It's a much more satisfying read. I enjoy the show. I like the show a lot. But if, like me, you watch the show and you think, well, maybe some parts feel a bit rushed, maybe underdeveloped characters or story arcs that just play out, you know, just a bit bizarre. You know, if you think there's any kind of plot holes or anything, in the book it just goes into so much more depth. Just everything is covered, and it's just much more satisfying. Also comes with a cool little map of Westeros, which I'm not going to show. Top secret map. And last of all, we have Metro 2034. This is the book I'm currently reading. So, just so you know, the second game, Last Light, is not based on this book. Metro Last Light is its own original story. Metro 2034 focuses on Hunter. Now, in the games it's implied that Hunter is dead. In the book you find out what happens to him. This is focused on several different characters, and this is really interesting because this is a much different book to 2033. 2033 focuses on Artyom solely. You see the world through his perspective. With 2034 it focuses on several characters, and just the pace of it feels very different. I think because it constantly switches at a fast pace between the different characters, it just has a completely different pace to it. It's not a bad thing, it's interesting, it's different. I'm not sure if I prefer this over 2033, however I will say is there's a lot more creatures in this. There is a lot more action. The book doesn't waste any time jumping into the action, and it's interesting getting an insight into Hunter, because it's implied that Hunter was an absolute badass, but you don't see much of him in 2033. You really get an insight into just how much of a killing machine Hunter is in this book, so this is well worth the read. Obviously, read 2033 first. I am hoping to get 2035, as that was recently released, the English version. It's been out in Russia for a while, I believe, but it's finally been translated to English. So, this is what I'm reading. Stephen King's It is what I will read afterwards. This will keep me busy for a while. And then after a while, who knows what books we'll get. But as I say, I do have a habit of giving my books away because I'm just so generous. That's why my collection's a bit small. However, let me know what you guys think, and thanks for watching.